And you're welcome back. Senior Presidential Advisor Osafo-Maafo says government is still negotiating with the International Monetary Fund to avoid a possible withdrawal of the free senior high school policy. Experts are predicting that the flagship program could suffer bad fate when Ghana fully rolls out its austerity plans with the fund. However, Senior Presidential Advisor Osafo-Maafo says talks are still underway to ensure what government believes is the best policy option.
There is any sector that we should not touch the expenditure, that sector is education. Because we are preparing the potential use of our resources in a very efficient and effective manner. So if you touch education, you are undermining your whole development paradigm. So that is not the area to go when you decide to cut expenditure. They fund their support base by pointing out the amount of money government would save if the free SHS is abolished. People have written and I've read in the papers, arguing that one of the first things the IMF should look at as they admit us into the IMF program is to cut the free SHS. Let me tell you here and now, we are negotiating with the IMF and free SHS will not be touched. We cannot cut it. We are negotiating. The IMF itself as an institution is pro-poor. The IMF as an institution believes in education. So how can IMF ask you to cut free SHS? Don't you have free SHS in America? Don't you have free SHS in Germany? Don't you have it in Europe, everywhere? Most of the developed countries have free high school. We are taking the right path towards development. And I can assure you that the IMF will not touch the free SHS. Of course, somebody has called for in one of the speeches, and I agree. Let us meet to discuss the overall implementation with a view to improving efficiency and effectiveness. And we may realign certain things. But cutting it is out of the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot be neutral in this debate. I reject as false the argument that the economy cannot support these programs. The challenges we are witnessing in our country is short-term, and we cannot afford to sacrifice our common vision due to short-term economic pressures. We are looking long-term. Then the only policy to be retained by the IMF is free SHS. The debate should be and must be whether or not these programs contribute to the welfare of the Ghanaian and an educated workforce, and will make sure that this country is transformed in a very efficient and effective manner. And that transformation depends on education.
Senior Minister Osafo-Maafo, but what's the implication for the education sector, and also what's the future looking like for the free senior high school policy? Joining us now is Kofi Asari. He's Executive Director for Africa Education Watch. Kofi, thank you for your time here on The Pulse. You've heard from the Senior Minister. He says long term, that's the vision. We're keeping the free SHS policy. There's absolutely nothing changing about the policy, irrespective of the IMF conditionalities.
Well, I don't know specifically whether there was a question that he was answering or the context for this pronouncement. But I must admit that this pronouncement flies counter to what His Excellency indicated. We must have a conversation on how to sustain the funding of the program. Okay? And so if we are being told today that by the Senior Minister, I don't know whether he's still Senior Minister, that it's a no, then it means that his pronouncement obviously runs counter to what His Excellency said. But I would take His Excellency's statement than that of this.
What do you suspect is accounting for this back and forth? about the true state of the policy and what government's clear position is? Because the president in one breath says, well, we're open to the idea about possible reforms in the system. The senior minister says nothing is changing in that.
The behavior and posture of government of the Free Senior High School is never surprising to people like us, because we've seen similar interventions rolled out in other countries like in Kenya, in Uganda, which came on the back of political promises, especially the Ugandan one. Very, very politically charged policy from campaign level up to when Museveni won the election, the last election. And in spite of the challenges they faced in terms of the cost on sustainability of the program, because of the political fetishism attached to the program, there is no way you can have a discussion about making the program cost efficient. So I am not surprised at all when the senior minister makes that pronouncement, because his pronouncement is purely informed by the politics of the policy. But the point I want to make is that
right.
Anytime a policy is maintained in its form and shape on the basis of politics and not, let's say, social considerations or economic considerations,
right.
One of the key risk factors is that, yes, you can always maintain it that way. You can even decide to buy ice cream for all school children every day.
Right.
It is possible. There's nothing government cannot do apart from turning a man into a woman. But at what cost? The opportunity cost is that other subsectors of the education sector will suffer. And let me give you an example. According to UNICEF, in Ghana, we are spending 3 times on education for the 20th richest than the 20% poorest.
Break that down for us, because that's critical.
What I want to say is that if you look at our total education expenditure, we spend 33% of our expenditure on the 20% richest households, but spend only 11% of our expenditure on the 20% poorest households.
So which means that the issue about targeting will come up again.
Exactly. It means that we are not efficient in allocating resources, and at the same time, too, we are not equitable in the deployment of resources. If that happens...
But that's the name of the policy, free SHS. When we hear that, the expectation is that, well, it goes across. Everybody benefits from that.
Free basic education has been there for 15 years. Not everybody's benefited. If you go to private schools, you don't benefit from it. There's always a context within which you define the free to make it sustainable. And don't forget that anytime you make something free, the meaning is that everyone must equitably have access to it. Now, if you make it wholesale free, and the poor person is not able to raise their cost, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
If you cost a simple prospectus to a senior high school, it will take you to about 3,000 cedis. That is not a fees, the prospectus, the things you are buying to school, your trunk, your mattress. You take a simple prospectus from a senior high school, it will take you to about 3,000 cedis. There are some students who are not able to offer that, to afford that genuinely. If you look
so that's another barrier anyway.
Yes, if you look at the free senior high school data, 2018, 2019, 2020, as of 2021, there's some 10% of students who are placed by the computer in schools, but they are not able to honor their admission. I've not seen the 2022 data, but as of 2019, 2021, there was that 10%. Okay, the meaning is that by making it fee-free and then providing feeding alone, there still remains some cost barriers to the poorest of the poor. The point I want to make is that it is only when you begin to equitably point resources by investing more towards the 20% poorest and less towards the 20% richest that you will be ensuring that more resources in terms of the needs of the poorest are provided to them. They may need more than the 2,000 cedis a year fees that we are paying for both the rich and poor under the policy. That's why I want to talk about targeting. People don't get it. That will ensure that indeed, even though it is free, the poor are given unrestricted access because all cost barriers are removed. Let me also finally indicate that the senior minister said that yes, they won't touch it, but then they will review it to ensure that it's efficient. Okay, it is, but then they won't cut the cost. It is not possible to review a policy and to ensure cost efficiency okay, without cutting costs.
Some costs.
You will definitely end up cutting or sharing costs because cost efficiency or cost optimization simply means that reducing the cost of running the policy without necessarily affecting negatively access and quality. And that is how cost optimization, according to the World Bank and IMF, everyone means. So you will definitely cut some costs by sharing costs with other stakeholders or reduce the cost. But then you do it in a manner that does not restrict its relevance in terms of access and quality.
Well, when you look into that crystal ball, do you see government at some point facing reality and saying, well, we need to give up, we need to open up and do the cost-sharing approach which you've been talking about for some time now?
Well, as an advocate, okay, I have to be optimistic that at a point we have to increase the allocation of expenditure to basic education, to 50%. Basic education has a very high infrastructure gap. There are 5,400 schools taking place under trees. There are 4,000 primary schools without junior high schools, leading to high dropout rate. In the Northern region, for instance, about 30% of students are dropping out between primary 6 and junior high school 1 just because there are no junior high schools. And so there are huge infrastructure deficits. The reason is that there's no cash. Why? Because other sectors of the education sector, including tertiary, are all pulling resources, and secondary, of course. Secondary is now commanding about 25% of the education budget. Okay, so immediately you increase. If you look at the graph, and we are going to be launching an education financing brief next week Tuesday at the Kofi Annan Center. If you look at the graph, you realize that anytime secondary education's share of education expenditure goes higher, basic reduces. You understand, and vice versa. So there's a cost to this wholesale application of free senior high school. It hurts basic, and it also ensures that some 20+% of students who shouldn't have dropped out nationally. And if you talk about the northern regions, about 30% of students who shouldn't have dropped out, but should have transited from primary to junior high school and enjoyed the free senior high school, will not even have an opportunity of writing BEC because there are no junior high schools. You understand? So you are still restricting access to senior high schools amongst the poorest who live in the northern part of Ghana because you are overcommitting, okay, relatively to secondary education and denying some aspect of basic education adequate funding. So the opportunity cost of maintaining the policy this way is always the issue. It is never about whether government can do it or not.
Kofi, in the Education Week, of course, stakeholders will be dialoguing on some of these issues. If there's one thing government needs to pull out from the free SHS program without necessarily affecting their biggest fear of making the policy let's say, come with some burden to the parents. What should that be? What should we be targeting as a nation?
The feeding component. The feeding component is about 60% to 65% of the policy.
You want parents to provide that themselves?
We want parents who have the capacity by way of data from the Ghana Statistical Service. According to the Ghana Statistical Service, the average household income for the lowest quintile, I mean the highest quintile, that's the poorest 20%. It's about 9 cities or so. So they are very poor. But there's also data, household data available to the Ghana Statistical Service that says that the average household and then the rich households should be able to afford 4 to 5 cities a day to feed their children.
In terms of feeding?
Feeding. So government can simply decide that, look, let's use data to begin targeting the policy. It's a medium-term decision government must take. We are not saying it has to be sudden, but you must have a plan.
But the feeding component, you agree, is very essential. Nutrition is essential in the education as well.
Yes.
So
and that's why it's very important for us to take cognizance of the fact that while feeding children in school is important, when those children were in junior high school 3, they were being fed by their families.
How about the argument of uniformity, particularly when you are in the senior high school? And the expectation is that you just have 3 years to write the same exams.
So everything should be uniform. If you go to the university,
you tell me.
If you go to the university, there are fee-paying students, and there are regular students, and there are distance students. That is not uniformity. That arrangement is there for universities to be able to raise some IGF from the fee-paying students. Then it balances government's contribution. In 2000 or 2019, for instance, IGF alone contributed close to 20% of total education expenditure. A majority of the IGF came from the universities. It's for a reason. So if we say target and let the high income earners or the average income earner, for which we have data at the Ghana Statistical Service on all households in Ghana, we are virtually saying that spend less on the rich or the average Ghanaian and spend more on the poorest so that no one is disadvantaged. Then at the same time, if you are saving some cash, take it to the northern part of Ghana, where about 60% of primary schools do not have junior high schools. Those students can never taste free senior high school because they don't have a junior high school in their community. They have to commute for about 10 kilometers, and they are not able to do it for 3 years when they are in junior high school, and they drop out. So if you look at the dropout rate in the northern regions and how staggering it is, including Uti, it will be unconscionable to keep feeding my children in secondary school when you know I can conveniently afford that, whilst insisting that you don't have adequate money to build a junior high school in the community in the northern part of Ghana. That's the issue. So anytime you maintain the policy in the way that it's currently politically convenient, you will deprive a student in one of the communities in the northern Ghana an opportunity to have access to the free senior high school policy, because 60% of primary schools in northern region do not have junior high schools, and they have the highest dropout rate. That's the point we are making.
That brings up the issue also about the boarding house system that we normally run. Some say if we cut that out in terms of a policy measure and restrict persons to computerized placements that are within their catchment areas, that could also significantly deal with the challenge.
That is another option of having a discussion around reducing the costs. Okay. Yeah. But you see,
the boarding house system.
Yeah, but that discussion is not realistic within the short term.
Why so?
I said in response to the senior minister's pronouncement that you can either share costs or cut down on some expenditure, but you can't strengthen efficiency without doing any of the two. I know that reducing the boarding day ratio would reduce the cost. But listen, it is not convenient. It's not realistic to have that discussion in the medium term, because the medium term of government is to expand access to secondary school, mainly through the boarding. Because government has invested majority of the $1.5 billion loan it's acquired to expand free senior high school expenditure, invested it in expanding existing senior high schools. Now, what are existing senior high schools? Existing senior high schools are almost 70-30 boarding day. So you are expanding existing
on that scope, right?
Exactly. So you are not changing the ratios. You understand? That is government's philosophy of expanding access to secondary school to maintain the tradition.
But then the E-blocks, for instance, if they were functional, some are functional.
That is the challenge.
If we had gone ahead with those ones, that could complement the system.
That's the challenge we find ourselves in. We find ourselves in the middle of two political parties, and always one in government and one government in waiting, who have contrasting policies when it comes to expanding free senior high school, access to secondary education. Yeah. And until we have a point of synergy, we will keep wasting resources, because should another party come into power and say that I don't believe in the boarding system of secondary education, the boarding should be an exception and then the day should be the norm. They are going to invest in expanding day schools. So ongoing projects in the boarding schools will be halted. It's going to be a similar thing to what we experienced in some times past, where it took a lot of pressure to get government to complete some of the E-blocks, and some of them haven't even gotten anywhere because there was no money. Government will say there's no money, we want to build new schools or expand existing one consistent with our manifesto. If we encourage that, we'll be throwing money away. What I see is that there must be a point of confluence between both the NDC's idea of expanding secondary education through the day concept, which is international best practice. Ghana is the only country I know in the whole world where boarding secondary education is free. I've been to a lot of countries to monitor, to observe their free secondary education policies. It's nowhere. And even in Africa,
maybe it's because of how we've built the senior high school
that's why I'm saying that it's not something that can change in a short term.
Right.
But it's a discussion we must have to see how we can build synergy between the MPP's view and the NDC's view, so that when governments change, we don't find ourselves wanting by way of the tax cedi. Other than that, there will be abandoned projects all the time because this project doesn't resonate with my vision. And then we will not be getting value.
And Kofi, that brings to the fore the issue about insulating the free senior high school policy. Do you see that firm support and insurance, if I should use that word, for the free senior high school policy? Do you have fears that, well, if government changes, we have a new political party in power, something else could happen to the policy?
I don't think so at all. I don't think so at all. I think we've gone past that. I mean,
are you sure about that?
We've gone past that. We've gotten to the point where this course around the free senior high school is around how to improve cost efficiency. You understand? So that's why I am surprised that the senior minister was raising this issue. Okay, all the context for that. IMF is, who said IMF is going to cut? We met with the IMF. I was part of the team, the society team. I represented the education sector in the meeting with the IMF last week, Thursday. No one is talking about cutting anything.
That did not.
So I don't understand where. That's why I
IMF didn't give any posture that they may be cutting some of these things.
If someone is having its own apprehensions, fine. But those apprehensions are born out of, as I say, policy fetishism. It's a whole cloud of paranoia surrounding the policy because it is an emotional...
You feel government is scared about the political cost?
That's the point. That's the fetishism. Fetishism, the obsession and the emotional attachment to the policy must cease. Because no emotions does not develop or sustain a policy. You understand? Government is overly emotional about it because it perhaps knows that that is one of its strongest legs. I don't know how many legs it has that is standing on. But we are saying that, look, the policy is no more a property of a political party. It's a property of Ghanaians. So let's approach the policy with the aim of improving cost efficiency and sustainability.
Kofi,
because we want to see the policy remain every day.
Kofi, I'm interested in our engagement with the IMF because definitely the senior minister, well, I'm calling him the senior minister, the senior presidential advisor, and now I'm getting it right, wouldn't have gone ahead to say, I mean, we're not backing down on this issue about the free SHS, knowing so well that, well, the IMF didn't bring it up. Probably he has information that maybe we might not be aware of. Did you get that posture from the IMF when they engaged CSO?
IMF is not interested in cutting any social policy intervention. IMF is not interested in cutting any social protection policy. Any policy that exists to benefit the poor and marginalized, the poorest in our society, the IMF is not interested in cutting them. But the baseline is that the IMF is not even in the business of determining what government should do. It is government that will present its own program to the IMF. It is not the other way around. Okay, the way things are done has changed. I remember the last 2014 discourse with the IMF. That was a different regime. Now they've changed their engagement strategy. So our government will submit their own, if you like, homegrown policy to the IMF. So if there's a need for government to prune down public expenditure, within acceptable limits or manageable limits, our government will make proposals on where to cut and where to optimize, or where to do the cost optimization. It's not the IMF. So that's why I'm saying that I don't even understand who said the question for this, the senior minister to answer. But so far as I'm concerned, that question is not one being considered by the IMF.
A lot of activities happening this week. In fact, tomorrow as well will be the International Day of the Girl Child. Looking at the landscape and issues of inclusive education and all of that, what's the position of your center, Africa Education Watch, going into the celebrations tomorrow?
I think tomorrow is a very, very significant day for the IDG, International Day of the Girl Child 2022, the 10th anniversary of the IDG. And the whole world is, we are building momentum around reminding governments about the need to enhance improvement in girls' education. In Ghana, EduWatch, in partnership with Star Ghana Foundation and our partners, Ministry of Gender, etc., we will be organizing engagement with government to raise the issue of child marriage as we speak in Ghana. There are about 20% child brides in Ghana. And what I mean is that 1 out of every 5 lady is marrying below the age of 18. In the northern part of Ghana, about 35% of marriages take place, or happen. About 35% of marriages, have girl brides. And the bottom line is that girls who are not educated are more prone to being, participants in this whole child marriage enterprise. So we, as education advocates, are using the power of education to reduce and end child marriage. We are happy that His Excellency the President indicated at the festival, at the conference at the Independence Square last 2 weeks, that he is committing to mobilize resources, not only in Ghana, but also end child marriage in Africa. We are happy to have received such a commitment at that level. And that is why on International Day of the Girl 2022, we will have discussions on the need to strengthen the reporting and then the response system of the state to child marriage. When child marriage issues happen, parents despise their girls. They abandon them because they have refused to accede to marriages that would have been for the family. How is the state building a support system to support such girls to reintegrate and continue their education? How is our social welfare system working? How is the prosecution system, the justice sector institutions work? How are they working together to ensure that we achieve much higher conviction rates, for child marriage cases and all that? So we're going to have a conversation on that, and we're going to be here to
definitely
unpack the issue.
That conversation will definitely happen. But for now, we are grateful that you've been able to spend some time with us. Kofi Asare is Executive Director for the Africa Education Watch. We're still going